everyone. Welcome back to Sports Time HQ. I am your host, Fernando, and joining us today is not, in fact, our co-host, Keith. He will unfortunately be out for a couple episodes, personal matters, but we do have a special guest star here today. We have special guest star who is a writer and on-air talent at ESPN, Eric Moody. Eric, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. As I say often, if I were doing any better, I'd be a twin.
Oh, my goodness. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So one thing we want to get right into it is the biggest trade. I mean, I can't say biggest trade because there's been a bunch of big trades over the offseason.
Yes, there has been.
I mean, Tyreek Hill being traded from Kansas City to Miami. I mean, it was maybe like 20 minutes after he announced that stuff stalled, or even an hour later, and boom, he was traded.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts on this trade? Obviously we think Miami wins this trade, but overall during the actual details of the trade, Miami got Tyreek Hill and Kansas City got a 2022 first, a second, a fourth, and a 2023 fourth and sixth. What are your thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, I'm just like you for where the news, broke or rumors of the trade happened. I was like, really? They're going to trade Tyreek Hill? So I'll just kind of get into it. Looking at it from a fantasy lens, I'm like, he's still a wide receiver one, in my opinion. You look at Hill's body of work, you look over the past 3 seasons, with Patrick Mahomes, like he's averaged 8 targets, 81 receiving yards, 19 fantasy points per game. And, I'll be transparent. I think that trend will continue, with the Dolphins. Now, you look at Tua. I know everyone's thinking, well, what about Tua? He's not Patrick Mahomes. I understand that. But that doesn't mean that Tua can't get up to that level. You look at Tua, like over the last 2 seasons, like he's averaged only 213.5 passing air yards per game, while Mahomes has averaged 283.6. So definitely a big difference there. But if you look at the supporting cast that the Dolphins have surrounded Tua with, I think he's going to throw the ball down the field a lot more in 2022. He's got Tyreek Hill now. He's got Jalen Waddle. They now form the fastest wide receiver duo in NFL history. I think it's also worth mentioning, to bring all that together, that new head coach Mike McDaniel, likes to take advantage of his receivers' abilities to get yards after the catch. And no one is better in the league when it comes to doing that than Tyreek Hill. And I'll touch briefly on the other side of the trade. I'm like, you look at the Chiefs. I know they get all those draft picks, but just imagine like how the fantasy value is going to skyrocket for Juju Smith-Schuster right now. What do you think about this?
Oh my goodness. Once I saw the news break that Juju signed with Kansas City, I was like, Kansas City with Juju. I mean, it could be great for Juju, but at the same time, you got Tyree, you got Travis Kelce. Who is he going to get fed? Is he going to be fed the ball a lot? But now that Tyreek's gone, Juju's that number one receiver. Unless, do they go out and draft a wide receiver here?
Yeah, I think that they have to, given those, those picks that they have. I know they still have Travis Kelce. You got Juju Smith-Schuster. You also have McCole Hardman, so that'll be interesting to see. I know him and Mahomes haven't necessarily been calibrated consistently, so I think they are going to go get another receiver. And who knows what they can do in free agency. We still have some other viable free agents that are out there. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it in a fantasy perspective, I mean, Treylon Burks looks to be really that guy that people are thinking Kansas City is going to be drafting. It could be him. It could be even Jameson Williams, who might be falling right around that time. They could even trade up with the amount of draft capital that they have now. But if you look at the last 4 out of the 5 seasons, Tyreek Hill, top 10 finish in PPR leagues, 6, 2, 31, but that was back in 2019 where he had 12 games, so he faced injuries. Then wide receiver 1 and 8. And then his rookie season, he still didn't even do that bad. He was top 20 and number 19. Yeah. So the question is Tua going to be able to give Tyreek Hill the production that we're used to him seeing in fantasy? Or does Teddy Bridgewater jump in?
Yeah, I'd be really surprised, like if Teddy Bridgewater does jump in. Tua is going to have to, I guess, as they say, face plant considerably, for that to happen. Here's how I look at it. Now, I know a lot of folks out there are really big on stats and metrics and all those different things. So they do play a part. But I just think if you look at the progression of like a quarterback, year after year, I think that experience will obviously help. And if I'm Tua, I'm looking at this. I'm like, okay, got a new head coach. This team obviously believes in me. We've got Tyreek Hill. We've got all these other offensive playmakers. They're doing their best to position me for success. So he's got to obviously meet them halfway. And I think this will be the definitive season that, fantasy managers, NFL fans have been wanting to see from Tua. So I think the stage is being set for him to have a remarkable season.
Is this the make or break for Tua's career?
I think it is, because you're going to have people on, you have people on one side of the ledger where they're just like, okay, look at all these playmakers that they've surrounded him with. If you can't get it done this year, it's just, it's not going to happen. Then obviously you're going to still have those Tua apologists on the other side for where if he doesn't do well. But I think if I'm Tua, is that this is a make or break season, because if he has a really good season here, it's going to be good for the Dolphins. Obviously, great for the new head coach. It's going to be good for him, and he's positioning himself to really have a career-defining payday for down the road. But everything has to come together for him.
Yeah, and even to look back last season, last season, the Dolphins were in no contention to make playoffs and all of a sudden decided to win 7 straight. And then they were a couple of games short. But, now with having Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, not to mention Wes Welker, wide receiver coach Wes Welker, compared Jalen Waddle to a little bit of a, quotes, Tyreek Hill-ish. So that means you have 2 Tyreek Hills on that team.
Yeah, and they're both yards after the catch dynamos. So it is going to be glorious to watch. I did, on a funny note, I did tweet something out, just kind of mimicking what the Rock has been saying constantly about like Black Adam, about the I guess like the power structure dynamic in the AFC East is going to change. That's what Dolphins fans are saying right now. So it'd be interesting to watch.
So here's a question for you: Who's the toughest team in the AFC West?
Oh, in the AFC West. Whew. God, that's a tough question.
Before this trade, do we say that it was unanimously KC?
Yeah, I would say before, yes, because you've got a guy like Hill for where I'm like, he can take over a game like himself at the speed, but exactly. It's like I'm hesitating now, because you take him off of that team, who are they going to replace him with? Again, there's still some dominoes to fall that we don't know about, but I just need to have a better understanding of what that's going to look like. But I will tell you that gap is closing considerably. It's a tough decision.
For a team that's been to the Super Bowl a number amount of times, and then all of a sudden now you just trade away your key asset.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy. Especially, not to mention, it's not like the AFC West was getting weaker; they were in fact getting stronger. And one team that looked to be the weakest at one point was the Las Vegas Raiders. But but say no more, because they traded to Green Bay for Davonte Adams, who's our next guy.
Yeah. Let's discuss it, because that was a team where you asked me that question that really came to mind. If you're, let's say, okay, who's the team to beat here? And you got to look at the Raiders, and because Derek Carr, I'll kind of touch on a lot of things. I'll keep it tight. I'll try to weave everything in, but let me see where to start. Okay, all right. First of all, like I'll be candid. I'm like, Adams, he can still be viewed, in my opinion, like as an elite, wide receiver one. I don't really view his situation as a downgrade. You look over the last 4 seasons, Adams, leads the NFL, 432 receptions, 5,310 receiving yards, 47 receiving touchdowns. Fantasy lens, this is a guy that's giving you 22 fantasy points per game in his 57 active games over that time frame. We talk about Derek Carr. I'm like, Derek Carr, I think, is underrated. He's got 100%. Rapport. Yeah, he's got rapport with Adams, from their time together at Fresno State from 2012 to 2013. I think between them, they scored around like 39 touchdowns. They racked up a little bit over 3,000 yards. If you look at that time frame in the FBS, it's the most touchdowns of any like combo during that time frame. So let's tie this to the Raiders, because this kind of goes into what they gave up to get Adams. Like the last time a Raiders receiver had scored more than 269.4 fantasy points was way back to the year 2000. So let that sink in for a moment.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Mind-blowing, right? So I think that trend could change in 2022, where you add a guy like Adams on there. His arrival is obviously going to positively impact Derek Carr. You look at Carr over the last 2 seasons, he's averaged 19 fantasy points per game. You look at it from a fantasy lens even further, a QB2 or better in 82% of his games. Again, very underrated. To bring all that together, you're looking at Carr. He has the potential to finish as a top 12 fantasy QB. He's got an offensive-minded head coach, Josh McDaniels. You got Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller. Those guys combined for 15 targets per game over the last 2 seasons. So with Adams, he's going to get his targets, considering what they gave up. So So that's obviously going to negatively impact Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller for a bit. But if you look at this team as a whole, with giving kind of that surge of playmaking with Adams, I think that the Raiders can be a legitimate threat in this division, to kind of take that crown potentially away from the Chiefs. I can see it happening.
First and foremost, 2000, I wasn't even born yet. But going to Las Vegas, I mean, Keith knows, my co-host Keith, he knows that last season I was a big Las Vegas believer and I really had potential for them. And just with this trade, it just adds more on top of my fuel of how they are a great contending team. Yeah. And Carr is 100% undervalued. And I've been saying that last season, all season. Yeah. But now there's no excuse for Carr not to finish top 12 in fantasy and not to have a good chance of winning that division. If not even win that division, make playoffs.
Yeah, I'll chime in. One thing I thought about is that, like, you and I are both aligned as far as Derek Carr is not appreciated by the fantasy football community.
Yes.
So I would say one thing that's kind of impacted his fantasy value has been his passing touchdowns. He just hasn't thrown a ton of them. So with having a guy like Devonte Adams that's there, that's going to help out with that considerably. And in turn, that's going to raise his fantasy value. Like I said, I would not be surprised if Carr finishes like as a top 10, top 8 potentially fantasy quarterback. It's going to be the guy that we're talking about this time next year. The late round, quarterback. That was the guy that we should have had. So I just can't wait to see it because I've been a Derek Carr guy for a while now.
No, I mean, I really tried getting Carr just before this Adams trade too, and I'm really upset I didn't get him as many dynasty leagues as I wanted. But mean, looking at this team, I mean, you got Derek Carr, Josh Jacobs, Davonte Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Bryan Edwards, and then Darren Waller. I mean, this is a great team with a lot of potential. And Davonte Adams is still technically getting in the mid-age, 29 years old. But again, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1. 23 was back in 2019 where he faced injuries, and then wide receiver 3. So without injuries, he's a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy, and he should stay as a top 5.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'll be criminal if it doesn't happen, but then that's going to leave, really great value from another fantasy manager that's out there. Just imagine getting Devonte Adams at the top of the second round. My goodness, I'm getting excited just thinking about it.
Oh my goodness, I would love that. I've never had a share of Devonte Adams in fantasy.
No, it's glorious, as Loki would say, glorious.
Oh, no, I enjoy my Justin Jefferson shares. All my shares I got of him. Let's move on to a quarterback this time. Let's see. Do we want to go with someone who left out of Indy or one who just arrived in Indy? Which one do you want to go with, Eric?
Well, I'll tell you, let's go with the one that just arrived in Indy.
Yes. Matt Ryan, 36 years old. And I mean, he played his whole career in Atlanta. And looking at a fantasy perspective, QB 20, 12, 10, 2, the last 4 years. So if you really think about it, he's kind of gotten worse and worse in fantasy. And it's not like he had a bad team. He had Julio, he had Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage. Yeah. Obviously, last season, he really didn't have that many good weapons because it was injuries, suspensions. Calvin Ridley decided to take a break, gamble sometimes. And then, but now looking into Indianapolis, wide receiver 1 is Michael Pittman. And I don't know how much his value really goes up because there's only so much he can really go up continually, especially being a 36-year-old quarterback throwing to him. But wide receiver 2 is kind of a big question mark. I've been saying it for the past week. That is Julio Jones. It will be Julio Jones. I will be shocked if Julio Jones does not go to Indianapolis. Yeah,
no, I would too, and that's something where I'd love to see happen. For those two to get get reunited. So a lot to unpack here. Let me see where to start with Matt Ryan. I'll say first of all, one thing that cracks me up about fantasy is that a lot of people are always constantly looking through like the rearview mirror, I would say, and it's kind of like the adage for where you're not driving a car like looking in the rearview mirror. You're looking like straight ahead. But in fantasy, we spend so much time looking in the rearview mirror and not looking straight ahead. I think it's always best to have a combination of both. And that's the approach I want to take with Matt Ryan. So to your point, I'll be candid. Matt Ryan has posted one top 10 fantasy campaign over the last 5 seasons. I'll let that soak in for a moment. I will tell you, though, his 2022 outlook looks very promising with the Colts. You look at it, you mentioned some of his playmakers. I'm like, his playmakers in Indianapolis is much, much improved. You know, he's got like the
Mhm.
top fantasy running back, one of the top running backs in the league just in general, and then Jonathan Taylor. He's got an emerging star, Michael Pittman, who's coming off his first 1,000-yard season. You know, he's wide receiver 2 in fantasy, in my opinion. One thing that I think with having those two offensive playmakers will help is that the Colts use play action 31% of the time last season, which was the third highest rate in the league. I think that bodes very well for Matt Ryan, who, if you look at like last season, was like night and day when he operated out of play action compared, to when he didn't. I'm just curious to see what additional moves like the Colts will make. But if you look at a guy like Matt Ryan, he is more of like a QB2, but I'll tell you, he's definitely going to have some streaming weeks. I know he doesn't give you any, rushing attempts or any, like rushing yards. I know we're all enamored by that, the dual threat quarterback. But I think Matt Ryan will have a season for where he's not going to be an upper echelon quarterback in fantasy, but he's going to have some QB1 weeks and is really going to be a solid streamer for most of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I honestly would be shocked if he finishes outside of 20 anyways.
Yeah.
I'd be absolutely shocked because, yeah, Matt Ryan, he's getting up there in age. Of course, we like a lot of teams anyways, you like to have that rushing ability because it just adds some extra points to your scoreboard.
Yeah.
But QB 20 for Matt Ryan was probably his worst season in the last 5 years, and 100% was. But I don't see that happening again. You got Michael Pittman there. He's really, like you said, an emerging wide receiver.
Yeah.
And then all Indianapolis needs to do is tag Matt Ryan with a playmaker that he's played with for many, many years with Julio Jones. Now, in Indianapolis, you do have Kylan Granson, who was a rookie last season. They just signed Mo Alley Cox to an extension.
Yeah, I like that move, yeah.
I like that move, but Kylan Granson was my hopeful breakout this season if Mo Alley Cox did not get signed. But you got Jonathan Taylor there. You got Jonathan Taylor, who is a absolute machine.
Ooh, yes, he is.
All you got to do is just dump the ball off, like you said, play action pass, dump it off to him.
Yeah, and then Matt Ryan, he's got the experience. He's very, very capable, and so it's I think it's putting him in a very, very favorable situation. So I like the playmakers that are around him. But again, since I know we're just in March, almost in April, NFL draft isn't here. I'm curious to see what other pieces they build around him. But I think the outlook looks promising. And again, he's not a guy that you and I are saying, hey, go draft this guy as your QB1 for your team. He's maybe a guy that's in leagues where he goes like undrafted. But I think if, as a QB2, I think it's some upside there for him to exceed expectations.
Oh, and I will definitely be targeting him, especially in QB and Superflex leagues. Totally. He's got to be underrated in Superflex, 100%. Yeah. So you could really get him maybe 10th, 11th round, maybe if startup.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable. I haven't looked at any ADP for this week, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if he's going much, much, much later. You want to go on the other side of the ledger and talk about Commander Carson?
Yeah, Commander Carson. I haven't heard that one. That's really hilarious. It's almost as bad as me talking about the I don't know if you know about Trevor Story going to Boston. I kept saying story time in Boston. But anyways, let's go with Commander Carson. Commander Carson, I was always out on him. Always been out on him the last few years, and I will always still continue to be out on him. But I did have some times where I kind of stuck with him last season. He did finish QB 14 in 2021, but he only had a top 10 finish in 2017, which was when he was QB 5. So you do have Terry McLaurin. I don't see Terry McLaurin's value going a little higher than what he really was. I'm saying Terry McLaurin's value stays around the same. Logan Thomas coming off an injury. It's going to be interesting, but Carson Wentz does like throwing to his tight end. So I think Logan Thomas, his value continues to rise. Cam Sims, they re-signed. We're going to see how well he does. You have De'Ami Brown as well.
Yeah, true.
Nice rookie. But Indianapolis, they got a second round, a third round, and a 2023 third round. So, and it could end up being a second for Indianapolis if Carson Wentz plays a certain amount of games. And then Washington, they got Wentz, but they also swapped that second round pick this year, which is only 5 picks difference. But your thoughts on Carson Wentz? Do you think you would have rather had in Indianapolis as a GM? Would you have rather had Matt Ryan, who's 36 years old, or Carson Wentz, who's 29 years old?
Yeah, I would rather have Matt Ryan. I think if I was going to compare Matt Ryan's decision making with Carson Wentz's, I have more confidence in his decision making than Carson Wentz. It's just some decisions that he makes on the field where it kind of leaves you kind of scratching your head. But I think Matt Ryan will provide like a stopgap to get them to where they want to be. Another maybe 2 seasons, maybe 3 at the most, just depending on how healthy he is. But you look at a guy like Wentz. I don't think the Commanders. I keep wanting to say football team. I'm just
I know you're so used to it.
Yeah, it was about to come out, but I would say even you mentioned Carson Wentz's age. It's like they're not looking at him like, hey, you're going to be our guy until you're like 38 years old. They're not thinking it. Maybe 2-3 seasons at the most. But as far as Wentz, just to kind of get into it from like a fantasy lens, I just think considering, and you kind of touched on Washington's limited, I would say, number of receiving playmakers.
Yes.
I think like Wentz is kind of more of like a high-end like QB2. I think what you could do to position him to be successful, if the Commanders are saying, okay, hey, let's continue to rely heavily on play action passes, I think that's a good thing for Wentz, because if you look at Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, going back to last season, I mean, they were the only other quarterbacks like of more play action passing touchdowns than Wentz, and Wentz had 12 last year. So again, he's more of a QB2, but the decision making concerns me. If he can improve the decision making and also slightly, raise his completion percentage, he had a 62.4% completion percentage last year. If he can improve on those 2 things, that'll position him more for success. But again, he's definitely QB2. He'll have some QB1 weeks, but I'll be transparent. He's not a guy that I'm reaching for. Sorry about that, Commander Carson.
Yeah, Commander Carson, I will definitely not be reaching for you. But I do agree with you on QB2 type of a quarterback. But as a GM in Indianapolis, I love Matt Ryan versus Carson Wentz. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Yes, you could talk about age, but Matt Ryan has actually taken his team to a Super Bowl. They didn't win because of my Patriots, but they did take him to a Super Bowl. Carson Wentz technically has not taken their team to a Super Bowl. It was Nick Foles. Keep in mind.
Yeah, no, very true. I'll add this to your point about Matt Ryan. If anyone's having like some hesitation that's out there, perhaps this will kind of give you some different perspective. So we all remember. So Matt Ryan back in 2016, he won the NFL MVP. Yes. He actually leads the NFL in passing yards since the start of that season. So you look at Matt Ryan since 2016. With his passing yards, I think it's around a little bit under 27,000. 300-yard game. See how good my memory is here. About 38. And past TDs, I want to say it's around 165 or 166. So in that range. So in those first 2 stats, like he ranks first, but as far as passing touchdowns, it's like 5th. And so I think he's in a position to kind of have like a career renaissance. Again, not a guy that we're necessarily saying to reach for, so don't take this the wrong way. But
I'm
a guy that
him
is
in the first round.
Yeah, in your first round right there. Boom. But he's a guy that can really help your fantasy team and give you some really good weeks, because like if you're playing with someone like Jonathan Taylor, that takes really a lot of heat like away, because you've got to account for that guy, right?
Exactly. And I mean, even looking in the Washington side, you have Antonio Gibson, who is one of my favorite running backs right now. I love Antonio Gibson. But I like the fact that they brought back J.D. McKissic, because it still helps with Antonio Gibson's value, because it doesn't hurt him, because his value was never hurt when he was there. Whereas if McKissic left, it could have hurt his value by them signing or drafting another running back.
Yeah.
But looking onto a Washington perspective, I mean, do you think Washington is just trying to put a Band-Aid on that quarterback situation? Like, I mean, it's been Fitzpatrick, it's been Heineke, it's Wentz. I mean, they're all over the place with quarterbacks. Should they have just drafted a quarterback here this season? Or do they still draft a quarterback this season?
Yeah, I think that they still draft a quarterback, but again, who knows what they're going to do? It's kind of that scenario for where you've got. Think about the best way to phrase this. Let me see. All right, I'll just go and put it out there. I'm like, you've got what always fascinates me with these NFL teams. I'm like, you've got some NFL owners that are very hands off. You've got some, that meddle. Now, I know all of them are obviously very successful because they're, billionaires. So they've built businesses, sold businesses, had numerous liquidity events, I'm sure. But what I always found fascinating are the ones that really take a hands-off approach, saying, hey, I'm smart enough that I know that I've earned all this money paying these people to do a job. I'm going to delegate, but then also to have like more of a long-term view and not be so short-sighted. And the reason I'm saying all this, because I feel like that Washington is always very like short-sighted. They actually think they're further ahead than what they are. And that's how we get Commander Wentz. There you go.
Yeah,
So they're not preparing for the long term. This is like a Band-Aid. And I don't think it's going to work as well as they think.
No, it really isn't. If I was a GM for Washington, I would have probably maybe tried to get rid of Heineke. Maybe no one wanted him, but still, I mean, this season it was a quarterback frenzy in the offseason. And I mean, you could have got rid of Heineke, even could have gotten some type of draft picks in order to make that solid rookie pick made for Malik Willis, who, I mean, had an amazing pro day, or Sam Howell. I mean, you got Kenny Pickett. You got a good amount of quarterbacks in this draft. Obviously, we haven't seen this quarterback draft is not as strong as last year's or the previous year. But, I mean, you're just adding Band-Aids. Why? Why are you adding Band-Aids? Maybe you're trying to go for CJ Stroud next year. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just a frustrating situation. So I can only imagine if you're a diehard Washington fan on how frustrating it can be. But yeah, again, we're looking at a 2 or 3 year window of Wentz, and we'll see what happens. But it'll be interesting as always.
Yeah, 100%. So we're about halfway through with all of our trades that we want to get covered here for our fantasy outlook. But before we go on to our last 4, I want to go through these last 4 that we just went, and I want to do a little over/under game with you, Eric.
Okay.
Tyreek Hill is going to be our first one. He finished wide receiver 6 last season.
Okay.
Does he finish over, as in like wide receiver 1, or under as he falls?
Yeah, my initial thought is that he'll finish under.
Under. Okay, yeah. So you're thinking he goes outside of wide receiver 6.
Yeah, I think so, but it's going to be pretty close, but I do see him going under, because you've got a lot of receiving playmakers there that need to get fed. We haven't talked about Mike Gesicki. We talked about Jalen Waddle briefly. And you also have Chase Edmonds there. That's very capable as a receiver out of the backfield. And so I would say I'm thinking more so between like wide receiver 8 to 10 with the finish. So I'm going under.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. I'm going to go under, but it's not like it's a big under like you were even saying. I think it could be even like a 7-9. I mean, I don't see him going outside the top 10, 100%.
No.
All right, let's go with Devonte Adams. He finished wide receiver 2 last season, and he's finished wide receiver 1 2 years ago. Does he finish over, as in 2 or 1, or does he drop?
I'm going to say over. It's I think it's been a lot of stuff behind the scenes that have built up to get to this point. It's like clearly these two men have played, college ball together. They've clearly stayed in touch like this entire time. This is something that's most likely been in the works behind the scenes, probably between the two of these guys for probably easily well over 5 years. This has been in the making, and so I think they're going to hit the ground running, and I can see it happening. He can still finish as a wide receiver 2 or 1. So I can't wait to see it, because I love stories like this. Just non-fantasy type stuff. Just seeing these guys kind of reunite and set the world on fire. So can't wait.
I would be amazed to see him finish in the top 10 3 years in a row, but I think he still will. But he doesn't finish 1 or 2. I think I'm voting under on that. I think he gets between 3 or 5.
And I think one thing too that'll be interesting is that I think his numbers could be really propelled like in that touchdown area too. The targets will be there, but it'll be funny seeing like Derek Carr like have a season where he averages like 2.5 to 3 touchdowns a game. So I can't wait. Be curious to see if it happens.
Carr's going to blow up next season. I'm so excited for it. Matt Ryan, QB 20.
Okay.
I'm going over on this. I think you're going to go over on this one too.
Yeah, like he's going to finish greater than QB 20, correct? Yeah.
Oh yeah. No,
you got to go over on this. He's in a good situation, and then just knowing the competitive nature of these players, he's going to have some incentive to really, really have a great season. After Atlanta's like, hey, your time's up here. We're moving on. So yeah, he's going to come out on fire. So it'll be great.
Yeah. Like we were both saying, I think we both said he finishes top 20 easily.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
Carson Wentz going to Washington. He finished QB 14, which is kind of like, I mean, I feel like that's what I would be ranking him anyways. So it's really hard with this over under because I feel like these quarterbacks are kind of like right around that time.
Yeah.
I want to hear your side first.
So you're saying if he's going to finish for where? Where's the line at? Where are we thinking?
QB 14 over under. So over, he finishes top 14.
I'm gonna say under. It's just he's gonna have some spike weeks, but I just think his decision making is going to get him in trouble. He's gonna have some games where it's like 2 or 3 interceptions, not a lot of yards. I'm gonna go under here. Go under.
I really, because here's the thing, he could finish 12 or 16 to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm gonna go with worst case scenario. Like I've been against him this whole past couple seasons. Yeah. I'm gonna go under, and I think he finishes right around QB 16.
Yeah, it's reasonable.
So, all right, let's go on to our last 4 players. And I mean, these are big players, big players. Let's start with one that really started this whole frenzy of the offseason. And that's Russell Wilson, 33 years old, going from Seattle to Denver. And I mean, Seattle, you really won this trade. QB Drew Lock, yes, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, tight end Noah Fant, who's only 24 years old, mind you, and a 2022 first, second, fifth, and a 2023 first and second. I mean, this was an absolute gold mine for Seattle. They have so much capital. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's no need to overcomplicate it. Like you look at Russell Wilson, like he now has, let me think of the easiest way to describe this. He has like the best, like the youngest, deepest group of receiving playmakers in the league. And I would say probably some of the deepest and youngest receivers that he's had like at his disposal. Like you look at Wilson, like he still has elite arm strength, accuracy, high football IQ, and I think he'll be leaned on heavily by the Broncos. Now I know it's been the quarterback landscape in Denver since John Elway has been as desolate as the wasteland in the Mad Max film series. So Denver has finished 21st or worse in the league in passing touchdowns in each of the past 6 seasons. So they are ecstatic to have Russell, Mr. Those, what are those things that called to have all the quotes, accessories? Russell, accessories, Wilson is their starter. Like he's a QB1. He has the potential to finish, top 5 at the position. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do with these playmakers. So pretty straightforward situation.
Russell Wilson, Javonte Williams, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Albert O. I mean, this is an absolutely amazing team. Denver now really has a potential to win the division, like we said with Las Vegas. Then again, everyone in AFC West can win that division. But Russell Wilson really helps. And is this Denver's year to make it? Like, does Denver have to make it to the Super Bowl within these next couple of years?
Yeah, I think they do. Considering like with this trade, that they made. John Elway wants to at least leave, a solid legacy and not have people think, okay, well he won that one, Peyton Manning. If they win one with Peyton Manning and they also win one with Russell Wilson, I'm like that'll be a pretty amazing legacy. And so, jokes aside about Russell, accessories, quote Wilson. I'm like he's a leader of men. He's going to get those players. They're going to rally behind him and what he's all about. And I'm excited to see it. I'm like he actually has a shot if they're going to let him cook, which it sounds like they will. Finally, to let Russ cook. I'm like, he's actually a legitimate candidate to win like the MVP award, I think, for this year. So I think he's going to have that type of a season, and it's going to be great, great for fantasy. So he's going to be one of those guys that you draft, and he could have like potentially a Patrick Mahomes type of season from a couple of years ago. So excited to see it.
I would not be surprised if he wins MVP of the year. And looking at a fantasy perspective, he's only finished outside of top 10 2 times since he came into the NFL.
Yeah.
That was this year where he faced injury, QB 16, and his rookie season where he finished in number 11. But from 2013 to 2020, he finished top 10. Mind you, he finished top 5 many of those times.
Oh yeah, it's been stud.
I mean, 3-1, 3-3. I mean, this man is elite, and he's 33 years old, and you would think he starts declining. But this man, he doesn't decline because he'd be spending $1 million every single season on his body.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that quick side note on that, because I was chatting with someone about this on Twitter, just is that I mean, you really learn a lot about like you mentioned, like a million into like off season, like with diet and regimen and all that stuff. But you can really learn a lot about a player, about kind of how they take care of their body, and he's still in his prime right now. And so, I think things are coming together for him nicely. Again, I'm excited to see what happens. But yeah, I'm like, he's going to be in peak physical condition, and we're going to get all excited over these videos that he's tweeting out, like throwing deep balls to Cortland Sutton. I'm just waiting for Twitter to break when the Jerry Jeudy video comes out. That's what I'm waiting on.
Oh my goodness. Everyone's so high on Jerry Jeudy. It's crazy. And mind you, Wilson wants to play till he's 45. That's 12 more years. So if you really think about it, dynasty perspective, he's a smash buy.
I got something else for you. I guess I'm kind of on a roll here myself. So we were talking about Russell Wilson this season and stuff like that. So one thing I thought about when this trade first happened is like the Broncos, like they seem to be following like the same outline as like the Buccaneers and the Rams. So it's like, all right, we're going to add a star quarterback to a team with a strong defense. Look at 2020 Buccaneers added Tom Brady, ranked 7th in defensive efficiency previous season, won the Super Bowl. 2021 Rams, Matthew Stafford, baby, ranked 1st in scoring defense the previous season. What was the outcome? Won Super Bowl. 2022 Broncos added Russell Wilson, defense ranked 3rd in scoring defense in the previous season. What is the outcome? We'll all find out, right? I'm excited.
Super Bowl. That's what it is. But imagine, I mean, obviously this wouldn't happen, but imagine then again it could. But imagine Denver faces Seattle in the Super Bowl.
Oh man. That matchup would be wow. That would be ridiculous. That would almost be as epic if it was like with Buccaneers and Patriots. But I think that would be fascinating, if that happens. Wow. I hadn't thought about that. That would be epic.
I mean, we don't expect Drew Lock to do anything, but you never know. Magic happens. But if you really think about it, Seattle got one of Broncos' really great tight ends. I mean, it was they drafted him in the 1st round, and a couple years later they trade him away. Obviously, you get your star quarterback, but I mean, in this trade, it was Noah Fant that went to Seattle. Noah Fant, he's now on the team with Drew Lock, who is, as of right now, the starting quarterback for Seattle. You got Chris Carson. As of right now, I made sure to put that note in. Chris Carson, Rashad Penny came back, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant. This team doesn't look that bad, and it doesn't look like they want to trade Tyler Lockett either. And I really think, and I've been saying this myself, I really think Baker Mayfield goes here.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that happening. It just depends on how stubborn the Browns are. If they're if they're going to trade him, and they're like, no, we're not going to trade you, and he's like, I want to be traded. No, but we'll see who ends up breaking there. But it would be interesting to see that happen because, like to your point, if Baker gets an opportunity for redemption there, and he's healthy, because he's obviously banged up last year, that would be an intriguing storyline. I'm here for that.
Yeah, I mean, if Baker goes there, are they Super Bowl contenders?
Yeah, I think that's a stretch. I don't know if they would be. It just depends on what type of season that Baker would have. And again, you could just never tell. You may have a quarterback where it's like, this quarterback A is not, the lights haven't come on completely, in these 3 to 4 years, and all of a sudden it's like, it's a green light, and he could just be unleashed. So I'm not saying it can't happen. I just think it's highly unlikely. But I'd be curious to see.
Yeah, I think they're playoff hopefuls if Baker goes there, but I think they would need at least another year or two to really put them into Super Bowl contention.
Yeah. It'll be tough. That's a tough sell.
Yeah, and if you look at Noah Fant, I want to hear your side of this. He's 24 years old.
Yeah.
He finished his rookie season. Obviously, rookies for tight ends are really hard unless you're Kyle Pitts or something like that.
Yeah.
He finished tight end 17. Then he finished tight end 8, and then he finished tight end 12. So he's kind of an iffy tight end, like a tight end 2 almost, you could say. But
Yeah.
we were all drafting him as a tight end 1.
Yeah.
Do you think he is still being drafted as a tight end 1?
I don't want to have like a cop out answer. I would say it's more so like borderline. Here are my concerns. It's like his value clearly takes a hit with the trade.
Mm-hmm.
Now you mentioned about Drew Lock. He's got Drew Lock under center. I think he's still a high end tight end 2, low end tight end 1. Just considering how desolate the tight end position is, making another Mad Max type reference. But I'd say another concern is like Will Dissly. He signed that contract. I think it was like 3 years, like 22, 24 million, somewhere in there. That kind of complicates things because you got funds that are allocated towards Dissly. He is going to get some targets, so he's splitting targets, and ultimately, I feel like it's a scenario where I think these guys are going to ultimately kind of like cannibalize their fantasy value, unfortunately. But again, he's not a tight end that I'm reaching for, but if he's there, I take him. If it's like tight end premium, if I can start 2 tight ends, like he's a really good tight end to get, but he's not a guy I'm reaching for, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I was really excited for him coming out of college, but
oh yeah, me too.
Obviously, with this trade, it kind of raises some concerns, especially with Will Dissly. I mean, is Will Dissly going to be just the main blocker? But like you said, he's still going to get targets. But something I want to keep in mind is Noah Fant really has never had a true quarterback.
Unfortunately.
In 2019, he had Joe Flacco for 8 games, Drew Lock for 5, Brandon Allen for 3. In 2020, Drew Lock for 13, Jeff Driscoll for 1, Brett Ripien for 1. Yeah. And then in 2021, Bridgewater for 14 and Lock for 3. He's never really had a really great quarterback. And if Seattle decides with the number 9 overall pick to go with Malik Willis, does Noah Fant's value go up? I mean, I think so.
Well, yeah, I think so as well, because you're getting like a quarterback, upgrade. Like, just imagine how lethal he could be if somehow Russell Wilson was still there. So I think if you get an upgraded quarterback, I'm like, absolutely, because he's got the talent, he's got a great collegiate body of work, the athleticism, all those intangibles. But yeah, it's just really the quarterback plays the things that's kind of hampering his value. Yeah, that would be an interesting scenario,
right? I know we talked about Baker going to possibly go to Seattle, but I did hear rumors that Steelers wanted him, but no one's going to trade a quarterback in division. So Steelers, the only way they're going to get him is if somehow Cleveland decides to cut him, which I find very hard to believe that they're going to cut him.
Yeah, that would be.
But are you going to hold him after what I think June 1st is where you get your next payday? Do you hold him until then? And then, I mean, are you really not going to trade him if you can't find an offer?
I just think they have no choice, but to trade him. I don't. Again, it's one of those things where you're like, we don't know what the Browns are thinking and what they're doing. It just, they've made questionable decisions or things, publicly in the past. So I just think you have no choice but to trade him. I'm like, you got a guy that doesn't want to be there anymore. He's a distraction. You got Deshaun Watson. You also have Jacoby Brissett as like your number 2. He's clearly not like in the plans unless they just want to pay him to go away and he doesn't play or sits out for the year. It's just like, it's just going to be a circus. And so why do you want to have Deshaun Watson coming in? You got Amari Cooper. You got these guys that you're building around. It's like, yes, let's go have the season. But over here, it's Baker Mayfield. I'm like, why are you going to do that? So it's like, let's just go ahead and trade him. I think they'll bend and they'll just trade him. The question is, like we were talking about a moment ago, is where is he going to go if that comes to fruition? It'll be interesting.
And the biggest question is if he doesn't get traded before the NFL draft, these teams with QB needy teams, they're gonna have to draft a quarterback.
Yeah,
and once they draft a quarterback, Cleveland is right now in the hole.
Yeah,
and maybe it's for the good. Maybe it's to trade Baker Mayfield at a discount price. For other teams, but.
Yeah.
Cleveland won't be looking too good if they keep both Baker and Watson. But
that's going to be a circus.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to start putting the clown masks on. But it's a good segue. It's a good segue to our last 2 people. And I mean, is this the Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins type of connection that we've been waiting for? I mean, Deshaun Watson, 26 years old, Amari Cooper, 27 years old. Watson, Houston to Cleveland, Dallas to Cleveland for Amari Cooper. I mean, Amari Cooper, looking at his stats first, wide receiver 27, 15, 10, 19. Does he finish top 10 this season?
Ooh, that's a gosh. Part
Mm,
of my instincts and gut is saying that he finishes just
12.
outside. I like the landing spot. Okay, let me think here for a moment, like on the fly. You're saying top 10, right? Top 10.
Top 10. Now, here's the thing.
I just, it's gonna be hard for that to happen. I think he's more of a high end wide receiver too. I just think top 10. That's a wide receiver one. When they've got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, I just don't think that's gonna happen. And Watson, that is a rusher as well. So tough questions, my friend. Tough questions.
Yeah, I think he does not finish top 10, but I think he
Hmm.
finishes 12 or 13, like very close to that top
Hmm.
10 border.
Yeah.
But here's the biggest thing. So Cleveland, they're if you look at their second wide receiver, guess what?
Hmm.
It's a question mark because we still don't know. Is it Landry or is it Will Fuller? Mind you, Will Fuller goes to Cleveland. This is deja vu for Watson and Fuller.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think that could happen. But you got Donovan Peoples Jones that's there as well. Another guy that really benefits from this is David Njoku. You've got him as well. Like Fuller's a wild card that can kind of really change this dynamic. But if I were looking at it just as the way it is now, I'm like Watson is still like a QB1. I'm like this is a guy. I'm like he averaged 25 fantasy points per game. From 2018 to 2020. Last time we saw Watson on the field, I'm like he led the league in passing yards and finished fifth in fantasy points among QBs. I'm trying to think about something else with it. One other thing I'll leave you with, I'll pass the baton back to you, is that hopefully I get my year correct on this, is that if you look at Watson, the only time he's played like with a running back that's had like over 1,000 yards, in a season was Carlos Hyde back in 2019. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see the dynamic with Watson, with his rushing ability, throwing the ball, dual threat, obviously, with a guy like Kareem Hunt, but also with Nick Chubb. So I think it's going to help the passing game out quite a bit because, again, those are two offensive playmakers you have to account for. But anyway, kind of right down the rabbit hole like a little bit there. I know we'll probably talk about a Cooper too. I'll hit pause on saying some things about him, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, Deshaun Watson, I mean, you were saying QB1. This is an absolute QB1 quarterback. But the question is, he signed a 5-year, $230 million deal. I
Yeah,
mean, this
big
man
money,
got
baby.
paid. Man got paid to sit back and relax and go to court for a whole year. Now he's getting paid. And he's the highest paid quarterback. But it
Yeah.
does pay off if he does end up hitting on this because Cleveland is getting a top 5 QB. I mean, in fantasy, QB5, QB5, QB5. 20, 19, 18. Last 3 years he's
Hmm.
played. His rookie season, he was going for QB top 5
Yeah.
potential, but he tore his ACL, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that hasn't stopped him in the years after. Whether
Nope.
or not he starts slow is the biggest question because he could start slow now that he really had a year off. If you really think about it, of QB NFL play. But the question is also, does he get suspended this season?
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. I personally don't think that it's going to happen. If the legal proceedings turned out differently, I can see that happening. And again, this is taking the court of public opinion like outside of it. I'm like just looking at the facts that are out there. It's like I just think it's highly unlikely that it happens unless any other new information comes out. So I think he'll end up playing.
Yeah, I mean, once the court really dropped all the cases, there was really obviously there was rumors that he could still be suspended, but like
Yeah,
if everything's dropped, why are you still being suspended? Is the question.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's probably something that the NFL Players Union, if that scenario happened, those will be conversations and things to have. Just looking at it from like an attorney perspective, law's the
yeah,
law, rules are rules, right?
exactly. And if you do decide to suspend him, I don't see him being suspended for a whole season.
Yeah.
And I think I saw a stat on his contract is this season he's getting paid the veteran minimum.
Hmm.
So in case he gets suspended, he doesn't lose so much money,
Yeah, I did see that. You're correct. Yeah,
which
with that.
which is really smart on Watson and Cleveland's part. But
Yeah.
Cleveland's going to have to pay a lot. So overall, between the two quarterback wide receiver duo now, Cleveland, if you really look at their stuff, they gave away a 2022 fifth, a 2022 sixth, and a 2022 first. They also gave away a 23 first and third, and a 24 first and fourth. So you gave away 7 picks for these two players. Do they have to they have to hit on these two players, or else Cleveland's just 0-16 again.
Yeah, it's just looking at their statistical body of work. Cooper, whether it's with the Cowboys or with the Raiders, and Watson, obviously in Houston. I'm like, it'll click. I'm like, he's going to target Cooper, early and often. Cooper doesn't have to compete for targets with guys like Michael Gallup or CeeDee Lamb. So he's going to be the guy. He's going to have support. Donovan Peoples-Jones is there. Njoku, as I mentioned. Even if they sign like Will Fuller, it's like Fuller will be involved. I think Fuller is a better fit when he's like not the number one, like he was like in Houston, where he's playing alongside DeAndre Hopkins. And so even if you have him play 60, maybe 70% of the snaps, just limited doses, just given his injury history, that's probably for the best. So and he's a guy that they can easily just sign, pick him up, just given his free agent situation. So yeah, I feel confident that it'll hit, it'll work out. I think they'll be very flexible, we'll say, just given the dollars that are involved, because that's going to drive a lot of these decisions. And so they're going to build the offense around Watson. I know some folks out there are looking at, well, if Stefanski, wide receivers have only averaged this amount of points, and quarterbacks have only done this. I'm like, I get that. They're
looking at the review.
Let's not look through the rearview mirror. It's like we got $230 million involved here. It's like, hey, Watson, here's what I've noticed: the plays that work out really well for you.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to add these in. You okay with that? Yeah, coach, I'm good. So it's going to be a very collaborative process. So they're gonna run some plays and schemes that he's very, very comfortable with, in order to make it work. Because to be candid, Fernando, it has to with the money involved. Just saying.
if you don't hit on a $230 million deal, then there's something that I think you're the issue. Then it's got to be.
No. Bad for business, baby. Bad for business.
Bad for business, and that 230 is going to the trash. Looking at Watson's over under, he finished QB5 in 20. If he is not suspended at all, is he over or under for QB5?
You know what? I'm feeling like this would be an over. So I'm looking at it this way too. You've got a guy that he's had a year away from the game. That's only going to help his body, and I'm sure he's been working out and training during that time. And so I think he could have a really magical season. And he's going to want to show out, just considering those other quarterbacks in the division. If you're in a division with like Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, it's like, I don't want to be the bum out of this division. So it's going to be full throttle every week.
Yeah, and I mean, now that he's back, he's pushing someone that was top 5 finish last season. He's pushing them outside the top 5, because I'm saying over, and I think he finishes 3 or 4.
Yeah, I could see it, especially with the rushing ability. That only adds to it.
Yeah, I mean, Watson's a beast. I mean, I want to mention one of my dynasty leagues. It was a startup league one year, and I drafted Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson. This was only a 1 quarterback league.
Wow.
But this was also when I think Watson was just a rookie or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I gotcha.
So, it was the season after where he was coming off the torn Achilles. That's what it was. And
yeah.
So I got those 3, and then all of a sudden we went to a super flex league. I mean, that was top. I had top 3 quarterbacks.
Well, that was like a buzzsaw. I was thinking of some things. Since we're on the Browns, about Cooper, I want to throw out there.
Yeah, go for it.
You kind of had me thinking. So you look at Cooper. I mentioned like the competition from targets. Like, he doesn't have a lot of competition for targets. One thing here, I'm going to look through the rearview mirror slightly. Forgive me. Like, Cleveland has shown a willingness. You're not forgiving me. That's okay. I'm saying they've shown like a willingness, like, to funnel targets like to his top guys. And we mentioned like Jarvis Landry like earlier. I was thinking back to Landry like in back in 2021. I'm like, he had a 26% target share. The Browns last year, they threw the football was around like 520 times. Doing some cowboy math here, since I'm in Texas, it translates to about 140 targets for Cooper. And so I think Cooper 140 targets. I think he could work with that. So again, I'm still thinking like a high end wide receiver 2 with Watson, but I just think with Cooper, he's going to have like really some wide receiver 1 week. So he's a guy that I'm curious to see like how his ADP fluctuates from here on out. But I've been a Cooper guy for a while since he's an Alabama Roll Tide guy. So.
Well, now he's with Watson. I'm 100% on Cooper's train, but that means we're both over on him for finishing above wide receiver 27 like you did last season. Okay. Oh, yeah. It was a no-brainer, you know?
Yeah, you got to go with it.
And then falling back to our last 2 over-under players, Noah Fant, tight end 12. Right now, if we look at it, he doesn't really have the best starter, but does he finish over under top 12? That's really where a lot of tight ends have really fallen around that area.
Yeah, I was just thinking under, because he's got another tight end that he's competing for targets with, and he also has DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett as well. So I'm going under there.
Man, I think I might have to just disagree with you. I think he's going to finish. I think he's going to finish around 9, 10, 11.
Really? Okay.
I think, and that's by me saying that Seattle's going to draft or trade for Baker Mayfield.
Okay, gotcha. That's fair. I can buy it.
If Locke's there, I mean, he's probably under. But at the moment, I'm predicting the future. At least I'm trying to predict the future, and I'm hoping that Seattle does not start Drew Lock in week 1. I'll be shocked.
Yeah. That's a training camp summer storyline that I'll be monitoring closely. Let me tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And then our last person, which I think this is kind of a no-brainer, Russell Wilson, QB 16 finished last season, over under. I think Eric, you're definitely going to go under with this. I think you're going to go QB 20.
Yeah, I just don't think he has enough playmakers. So I think he's going to finish outside of the top 20. Just kidding. I'm going over on this. It's like this guy overall QB1 potential right here. Aaron Rodgers is on notice because he doesn't have his security blanket, Devonte Adams. You heard it here first, folks.
Yep. I mean, it's crazy that what Green Bay did. Like, there was just so many events happening with Green Bay.
Yeah,
it was like, oh, Adams is going to go Rodgers wherever Rodgers goes. Then all of a sudden Rodgers signs. Then all of a sudden Adams is franchise tagged. And then all of a sudden Adams doesn't want to sign the franchise tag. And then he's traded.
Yeah, because I really thought, going back to that once like he signed, I thought, just looking at it from like a business lens, is that, okay, obviously part of that signing was that, hey, Adams is coming back. But I remember just on Twitter, even just talking, it's like, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm like, if he wanted to go play with his buddy, it's just like, to go play with Derek Carr. And so I was like, once I saw the news happen, I was like, well, look at that. It's like, well, I'll be, boom, there it is. So it happened.
Well, I'll be damned. He's in Las Vegas.
Yeah, with his buddy. There you go.
It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So we have 2 differences, and that's with myself going with Noah Fant going over. He's finishing inside the top 12. You going outside the top 12, and then Devonte Adams, you saying he finishes inside the top 2, and me saying he finishes outside the top 2. So it'll be interesting. Little bet for us too for the season.
Yeah.
But we did all these over-unders, and you guys can go on to Underdog Fantasy if you haven't used that app. You can do over-under between a bunch of different sports, NBA, MLB, NFL, and NHL, and a bunch of other sports. Make sure to use code SportsTimeHQ, and they'll match your first deposit up to $100. Eric, before we go, tell us what you're going to be doing. What's your upcoming plans and the future that you've been working on?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest thing for me is, I guess the best way to describe it, like I've got a lot of things I'm always up to, whether it's NFL, NBA and WNBA, fantasy sports and sports betting content. So I always have a sport or multiple sports during the time of the year that I'm creating like audio, written, and video content for. So you can find all my content for those sports, whether it's fantasy sports or sports betting, over at ESPN. And if you haven't already, reach out on Twitter, Eric and Moody. Always happy to answer questions, and I enjoy Twitter, enjoy interacting, and I look forward to interacting with you here shortly.
Yeah, and question for you, since you follow basketball.
Sure, what's up?
Do you have who do you have winning March Madness? Are you following
March Madness? You know what? I did do a bracket. It's probably gotten blown up. I just did one for fun.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. It's hard for me off the cuff just to pick a team. Yeah,
yeah.
it's tough. I wanted LSU to win, but it's you know, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll have to see. But once again, make sure to follow Eric N. Moody all over social media at Eric N. Moody, and be sure to hit his DMs because he's always open to talk and talk sports.
Oh yeah.
Once again, my name is Fernando. I am your host of Sports Time HQ, and be sure to come back on Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we will have a special guest star who has not been announced yet. So be sure to be on the lookout. But Eric, it's been a pleasure having you on. Hope to have you on again in the summer, and we will see you all on Saturday.
Sounds good. Till next time.